Why, hello, greetings to you, and thank you for joining me on one of our periodic open Q&A sessions. We've been going through a whole series of basic questions about Heilkunst and treatment and how different things work, both on the philosophical side as well as the very practical side. And if you have a question, you can always just type it into the comment box below the video, wherever you're watching this. It's typically, a video box and then some comment boxes, or maybe on the side, depending on which platform you're on. And same thing, if you catch this as a replay, then you put your comment in, your question as a comment, and I will pick that up in a future video. So one way or the other, we get to have our dialogue, whether in real time or over time, kind of hopping and jumping from one media to the next. So anyways, so here we are. If you're with me live, your question box is open. If you're here with me on a recording, your question box is also always open. Or likewise, you can email any of your questions to info@arcanum.ca, and the same thing. I'll pick that up and bring that into a future video. So to kick off today, if there's anyone here, of course, you have time to type while we're going through the first question. And the first question is, as you may have noticed, I'm going through some of the very most common questions about Heilkunst treatment, and this one is on the topic of the remedy formula called NSOL. That's an acronym. I'll tell you about each of those letters in just a minute. But this formula is a very interesting one to talk about. Of course, we have any number of formulas, that we'll use for specific conditions. Last evening I was giving a patient an allergy formula, homeopathic remedy, for the symptoms of allergies, pretty self-explanatory. So there's any number of these kinds of formulas, but this particular one, the remedies I'll name momentarily, the NSOL, it's a very common question, and it's also for the reason that it's a very common formula that we use, in so many treatment plans, for reasons I think will become clear in a moment. And this, you can say in a very kind of simple way, we can say it's kind of an emotional formula, but it's something that goes way beyond just, the immediate subjective experience of our emotions, but it goes to kind of this deeper state of really what's the foundational structure of our state of mind, which gives rise to certain emotional reactions we'll have to events in life, or to people, to conflicts, what have you. So there's kind of a distinction in the understanding there as to what is the deeper foundational structure, of our minds, of our whole kind of relationship to the world as a whole, versus the individual instances of what kind of reactions come out of us. What this is also pointing to is, you may have seen me talk about this in other videos or write about it in other blog posts. It's such a common topic, and it's this basic distinction in Heilkunst. When we come to remedies and we come to treating certain states of disease, we have this fundamental distinction between tonic prescribing and pathic prescribing. And again, I won't go into the full explanation of all the technicalities of that. I just want to lay it down as a pointer here, so we can get into our context for the actual question today on the NSOL remedy. But just to lay down a little bit of a pointer here, that difference between tonic and pathic, it's sort of the way I've just been talking for the last couple of minutes. It's this distinction between, like, the tonic disease is one which penetrates very deeply and affects us at that more fundamental structural level. And most of the time, the nature of these tonic diseases is that we don't even know that one has happened, right? We don't even know we've caught a disease. We don't know that something has penetrated into us and has kind of fundamentally changed us at the structural level. So, and vice versa, the tonic disease also typically doesn't really push up much of any visual symptoms. Maybe over time, some subtle things will start to come up, but that initial impregnation with the tonic disease is by and large kind of an invisible event. So we have the tonic, this side I'm talking about. The other side I mentioned, the pathic, is usually the side that gets most of the attention, right? In our subjective experience, it's the pain and the symptoms that we feel, the dysfunctions we feel, Like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the allergy formula, that would be an example of a pathic remedy formula, around, itchy, watery eyes and, all these kinds of pathic allergy symptoms, as compared to what I said with the tonic, where we get little to no symptom expression. We just get more of a shift in the overall, the energy structure of the person. So the very perceptive person, or the very perceptive diagnostician will see those shifts. That's part of the whole job of diagnosis at the tonic level. But as I say, by and large, if you are not paying attention, if you don't know what you're looking for, you haven't kind of been trained, like, for your minds to focus at that level, you are, almost all of the time you're going to miss that. Like, it's not just going to come up and hit you on the head. I say, if you don't have that specialized training and focusing on that level, the tonic is by and large invisible, for all intents and purposes most of the time. So that's just the basic idea. As I say, you could find, I'll put links, in the replay later, to where I've written and where I videoed about that previously. It's a bigger topic, but that just should get you into the idea, so we could actually talk about our topic today. So yeah, tonic versus pathic. So when we get into this NSOL remedy formula, this is a tonic disease formula. Each one of those four remedies, the N, the S, the O, and the L, are aiming more at this tonic side that I'm talking about, as opposed to the example I gave with the allergy formula for the pathic symptoms, the itchy eyes and all of that. We're getting kind of into that deeper foundational level. So what is this formula? And again, I'll tell you the actual remedies in just a moment, but we're inching our way towards this. This NSOL, is really getting, I keep saying these are tonic diseases, and they're getting more into the deeper structural level. And a little more specifically than that, they are the structure of some of these very deep, at one level, what we can call these human emotions. But as I alluded to a couple of minutes ago, it's not just emotions, it's a whole kind of shape or form of a particular state of mind through which we come to, have certain experiences, in one direction versus another, right? To keep it at the simple level, that first letter, the N of the NSOL, is the homeopathic Natrum muriaticum. And you could talk, I mean, there can be a pathic expression of it. We can talk about, unresolved grief and sadness, unshed tears, this kind of holding on to some kind of loss or insult from the past, right? Something which is there in somebody's system but has not properly been expressed. So that could be the pathic side of Natmir, but that deeper tonic side gets really into this human archetype, this deeper aspect of the human mind, which you could call a state of trust in the world, in life, in how things unfold, versus the opposite. People who've kind of built up a certain kind of wall or defense against life, for one reason or another, they're not willing or able to let go and trust in the process of life. That's at this deeper tonic disease level. This kind of lack of trust is really, by and large, this invisible wall or barrier which keeps people from fully flowing through, the events of life, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, like all the things that come into our life that, try to flow into us and flow through us. If that tonic wall of Natrum muriaticum is built, then those things won't flow. It's like, they'll kind of bounce off the wall and, kind of land somewhere else. We've kind of successfully protected ourselves from life, but of course, by the way I just phrased that, that's obviously kind of not the smart thing to do. We don't want to be protected from life. We want to live life. So as a disease state, a tonic disease, I'm just giving you this example. This N, the Natrum muriaticum, is at this tonic level. It's this deep human archetype around that concept of well, some of the words I use: trust, flow, letting go, letting life in, letting yourself out, like letting yourself express yourself. So all these ideas of flow and letting go and letting things in, letting things out, the very activity of life is an interactive one, right? We're part of the world. We're meant to take part in it, right? We're not meant to be like that expression, no one is an island, no man is an island. Well, it's sort of like the sense of that. We're not meant to be separated out, where there's no longer any interactions, right? That happens, of course, at the physical level with absorbing our nutrition. It happens at the living emotional level in terms of people and relationships, and whether those things can flow in or not. But anyways, all these are good, clear examples of this particular natura muriaticum tonic state. But really, I'm making the bigger point here that all four of these remedies are these deeper tonic diseases, as I'm calling them, which are these grand human archetypes of, in one way or another, where some really primordial life function, consciousness function, is kind of frozen or blocked at some very unhealthy point. So that's our general point here. So we started with an example of the N, the natura muriaticum, and let's also visualize of those four remedies. Like, imagine the four main points around a compass. Of course, that's north, south, east, and west. But here we're talking about these NSOL remedies. So imagine these two polar opposites, around that compass. So around one axis, you can have the N, the natura muriaticum, and opposite of that is the O, which is the remedy opium, and that's a whole other state which has to do with kind of a deep fear, a deep anxiety. It's kind of this kind of dreaded or fearful anticipation of something bad happening in the future. Now, that is a polar opposite to Nat Mirror. Nat Mirror is very much about the past, the way I talked about it, but Nat Mirror very much also gives rise to this relationship to the future, which is kind of a fearful one. That's where you see the O of opium, and you see this polarity between the N and the O. On the other axis, you have the two remaining remedies of the four, the S and the L, and that gives you the Staphysagria and the Lachesis remedy. So Staphysagria, as this deep human emotional archetype or state of mind archetype, is really one around victimization, feeling victimized, feeling abused, feeling, having been treated unfairly, unjustly, all the kinds of emotions that come out of that is really that deeper state of mind. That wasn't fair. Somebody had no right to do that to me. Of course, all the physical examples, being, physically assaulted, or even, let's say, even wrongfully imprisoned. That's a tremendous injustice, right? And just having your physical freedom taken from you, that would be a tremendous Staphysagria life event. But of course, it can happen at much more subtle levels, right? Even the day-to-day, going in and out of these human experiences, relationship experiences, where we feel slighted, we feel hurt, we feel brutalized, victimized, whatever the case is. These are all pointing around that deep S archetype, Staphysagria as the remedy. And then so that's, I'm implying in what I'm saying, that's this kind of outward focus. The world, some person, some event, some situation has done me wrong, has victimized me, has violated me. So it's kind of coming from the outside in that sense. And its polar opposite, if we're around the 4 points of the compass, the L, or the Lachesis remedy, is kind of a very similar emotional archetype, but now it's a whole lot more internally generated, right? It's the feelings of guilt, inadequacy. I've done something wrong. I'm not good enough. Anything we said about that victim state of the Staphysagria is now seen from the other side. This whole sense of, oh, I've done something wrong. I've messed up my life. I've messed up this situation. I don't have the abilities or the capabilities to do what I should have done or what I'm supposed to do, in the near future. So around these 4 compass points, when you start thinking in terms of these polar opposites, the N opposite from the O and the S opposite from the L, you start to see much more of a dynamic interrelationship and movement among the 4 remedies. It's a little bit of a meditation you can do going around those 4 points and coming to understand each of those remedies. So and that's reminding me, another general point I'd say, we're talking about these 4 individual remedies, but we started this topic around the composite formula of NSOL when that's all put together. And there's a very important point within that, which is that you can't, this is a little bit of the challenge with our intellective minds. We want to see things very black and white, very split apart intellectual categories. Well, this is here and this is here, and they never touch, right? We think in those ways, right? We think in this kind of very dissociative, separative kind of concepts. But our big point here, when we're talking about this NSOL formula, and the same goes for other formulas as well, you get like that old saying where the sum or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. There's a big idea within that. When you get into such a formula, you have to think of it as something which includes all of its individual parts, but yet create something which is beyond any one of those four parts, right? It's not so. And where this comes up a lot, if we go to give a patient this NSOL remedy formula, they may often object. Oh no, this other homeopath gave me this remedy. Gave me Napmure or gave me Staphylos aureus. Gave one of those remedies, and it didn't work. It didn't do anything for me. So what they're really saying there is, yeah, you and your NSOL remedy, well, I've already had one of those remedies, and it's not going to do me any good. But what's being missed in that kind of conception is that the NSOL as a formula has a different energy, a different identity than any one of those single remedies on its own. Again, back to the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. So in this way of thinking with such a formula and other formulas, yeah, you have to start to, again, you study it through learning the four separate parts, like I said, those 4 points around the compass in this case. But there also comes a further point of study and meditation where you see the whole energy, the whole identity of that formula, which kind of takes on a life of its own beyond any one of those four parts, or even any pair of those parts. You can say, well, I've had these pair of remedies before. Well, that's still different than the four remedies all going together. So that's just a major point about formulas. You get kind of this, this additional layer of living meaning coming out of that formula than you would from any of the individual parts. So now the other practical question, getting into this NSOL formula and some of the ways we may use it, by and large, we will use it a lot for what we call the timeline treatment. We go back through the physical timeline of a patient, physical shocks and traumas, broken bones, and car accidents, and other sort of chemical toxins and drug toxins, and all these things which interfere with our primary physical functioning. Likewise, we have an emotional timeline. The great emotional events of our life. Great losses and great shocks, great disappointments. All the things that can happen at certain moments in our life will imprint as these deeper tonic diseases. In this case, the timeline remedies. And within that, we use that as part of the whole timeline therapy. So whether NSOL as a whole formula or some subset of that, 2 of the remedies together, 3 of the remedies together, whatever the appropriate combination is for a given timeline event, and we'll use it that way, to clear that part of the patient's timeline. And along with that, the other thing we do is treat the kind of the day-to-day now, what's happening now, because we may be focused on somebody's timeline, going back into the past, going through all these shocks and traumas, but life goes on, right? No matter if somebody is doing their timeline in treatment, they are still living today. They're going to be living into tomorrow and the next day. Life keeps unfolding, and we may continue to have some very kind of basic human experiences which are triggering these deeper archetypes, the day-to-day, disappointments and sadness and, feelings of loss and victimization and irritation and fear and anxiety. So we still continue to live these emotions. So that's where we usually will also give, if not the full NSOL, some combination of that in somebody's day-to-day dropper bottle. So that's, as I say, that's the present kind of moving into the future, while at the same time, we're reaching back into any number of layers from the past of shocks and traumas. So either way, it's still that, whether that formula NSOL or some subset of it, it's going to be kind of these same core archetypes. As I say, they can fall the past, present, or future, but the archetypes still remain the same as far as how we live into them. So that's a little bit of the outline I wanted to give. We have this really basic these four archetypes, the NSOL, as I kind of described all of that. And if you want to go into any further questions, you can put your comments in below, or of course, if you're watching this as a replay, you can do the same. You can go to our basic page on our website where we have these talks and the dates and everything are announced for them. Or if you happen to be watching me live, I will stick around for another minute or so, just to see if any questions are being typed right now as we talked. But otherwise, as I say, for anyone watching as a replay, same thing, put in your questions. Right now, if you have a question, I'm here. And if not, I will kind of come back around and bring it forward to a future video. So thank you so much for joining me today, and vice versa. The email address I said earlier is also a direct way you can send in your questions. info@arcanum.ca, arcanum.ca, like on my screen here. And I will likewise fold those in to one of my near future broadcasts. So thank you again for joining me today, and I will see you again soon.